why are marathons just so damn hard? They're really tough. If you haven't done one, well, let me tell you, they're not easy. They are an endurance challenge. And if you have done one, well, they're not easy. No matter which way you slice it, it is a physical challenge. In order to put our lessons in context today, I need to ground ourselves and hover over that question. Why is it so darn hard? Well, let's face it, first of all, it's pretty darn far to run. Just think about it. In fact, if you don't believe me, head outside right now, hop in your car, get onto your local freeway and drive for 26 miles plus, or about 42 kilometers. Don't listen to the radio, don't speak, just drive. Look around. It is a long way, and you have to run that distance to complete a marathon. The actual challenge of the race itself is almost a poetic expression of a challenge between cardiovascular fitness, muscular endurance, and of course, mental strain. It also includes fueling and hydration demands. It's actually far enough for hydration and fueling to matter. You see, the body can only carry about 90 minutes, maybe upwards of 2 hours of fuel available to help your running performance. That means by definition in a marathon, exogenous fuel is critical. Underfueling early in the race, you end up with fatigue. Relying on untested race nutrition, your tummy can get upset. You have inadequate fueling before the race, you're probably going to underperform. Underfueling in training, well, you've got huge risk of systemic fatigue or even injury. And so therefore, this is a huge component as well. Fueling is another, often in triathlon they call it the fourth discipline, but this is another challenge to marathon training. We also have to acknowledge that it is a long way, and running is a weight-bearing impact. Therefore, it has an amplified risk of injury. Yet it's really challenging because there's a pretty high likelihood that if you embrace the journey, unless you've got a really smart approach, you're going to get injured. What's that likelihood? Well, there's a widely accepted estimate that between 30 and 50% of marathon runners experience injuries due to training that either significantly disrupts or forces them to modify or pause their plan altogether. Almost half of you are struggling with injury cycles. And there's one other challenge as well that often faces so many marathon runners. And that's what we call the antithesis at Purple Patch of our saying fit and fresh. I can't tell you how many marathon runners really face the challenge of arriving fit and fresh, and instead they arrive in a fog of fatigue, either due to really poor prior planning or just simple overload. Now, it's harder to quantify precisely, but experts' consensus and coaching observations suggest that upwards of 40% of marathon runners arrive at their race really fit but systemically fatigued. 40%. That's meant that they've done the work, they've built the fitness, but they haven't probably absorbed due to perhaps inadequate recovery, overreaching, etc. And that's why it's so hard. You've got to get your performance recipe right. So not only is it long and load-bearing and you need exogenous fuel, but preparation is a real art and science in itself. And so how do we think about approaching a marathon? What's important in preparation? In order to consider this, I think it's really helpful to consider the elements that feed into a great marathon performance. Now, I spent some time reflecting on my own coaching, and I broke it down into quite a healthy list. So I just want to list these out. These are the requirements in preparation for marathon performance. And I think this is going to be compelling to you. Number one, as I mentioned, you need to be fit cardiovascular-wise. Cardiovascular conditioning is a central element, a strong aerobic engine, as we call it that. And that is developed through really consistent progressive running training. So we've got to be fit. That's very simple. We also need to think about the musculoskeletal system because muscular resilience is a huge important component. Let's think about that as having durable legs, able to withstand fatigue and maintain it over the whole distance of a marathon. Remember, it's pretty far. We also need a really smart strategy in fueling and hydration. And I would break this out into actually to fuel the journey of your training so that you don't accumulate too much fatigue, make sure that you're yielding positive adaptations, ensuring that you're minimizing the risk of injury, and of course, fueling and hydration strategy to actually sustain energy and avoid that wall that they talk about in marathon. In other words, the big bonk, and you don't actually run out of energy throughout the actual race itself. So there's a big umbrella of making sure you're dialing in day-to-day fueling and race fueling and hydration as well. So that's the third element. Number 4, pacing, a huge component. A really disciplined practice plan to distribute your effort, whatever fitness you show up with, distribute the effort to ensure that you can finish strong in the marathon. And we see many, many people struggling to execute that. You've got to get your recovery, and let's call it your taper into your race right as well. Really strategic rest, what we would call intentional recovery, infused into your program, and then added rest at the end of the program that you can shed any fatigue that you've accumulated from training without losing any fitness that you've gained. It's a hugely important component to it. We want you to arrive with that magical saying, fit and fresh on race day. We've also got to navigate this journey due to the fact that it is such a load-bearing activity. We have to prevent injury. We have to ensure that our load management, so far as training prescription, is really accurate. And that involves really sensible progression from your start line, whatever your background, history, and experience of running is so far, probably some additional strength work to ensure that the musculoskeletal system is really resilient, if you want to talk about that, and ensure that you're managing your training load not in terms of just duration, so miles or time, but also in the dose of intensity as well, so that you can really get dialed in on that side. There's a mental preparedness side of marathon preparation as well. The tools that you need to develop over the course of the journey and the mindset so that you understand and are equipped to manage the discomfort that is a part of racing, that enable you to stay present and make smart decisions, and also to retain confidence under the pressure that is inevitable on race day performance. And finally, the last one that I came up with, just logistics, familiarity. You've got to go through and really be rehearsed around what gear you're going to work, what is your strategy around it, your routine that can eliminate some of the surprises that are under your control, but also respond and not react and amplify stress when there are things out of your control that inevitably happen on race day. So there are 8 components that all feed into each other, into what you would label race day performance. So let's pause. And let's hover here. We have 8 things that we talked about: cardiovascular conditioning, muscular resilience, fueling and hydration throughout the journey, etc., etc. If you execute all of the elements really, really well, what is the one that is the most common limiter? Now, it's a big if in its way. You've got your pacing right, you've got your logistics, your mindset's perfect. What is the undoing for most athletes if they're doing most things really, really well? I think this is a key question when you start to think about how is it best for me to train for my marathon? What are the things that go in? What are the challenges that I want to understand so that I can address them? Do you know what the most common limiter is for marathon runners? Muscular resilience. That's the one. Even with great fitness, and if you pace it pretty well, and you have really good supporting fueling, and you're tough and you've got the right mindset, many runners break down physically in the last 10 kilometers or so, 6 miles. They get to about mile 20, and suddenly there is this accumulated muscular fatigue. It occurs particularly in the quads, the front of the legs, the calves, and up in the hips. You might have experienced this before. You're not under cardiovascular distress. Your mind is still sharp. You got lots of energy, and you look down, and those legs just won't behave. They won't respond. You're just not dialing it in accurately. Muscular resilience. I call it mechanical fatigue. And it is disconcerting. And it's highly frustrating. And it is the most common limiter for athletes to show up and match their training potential with race day performance. It is the thing. And the reason this happens so much in a standalone marathon is in the distance, and this is maybe the cruelty and the beauty of the distance, it's just short enough that you can operate at a pretty high level. And so what that means is you are experiencing quite a lot of eccentric muscle damage from the thousands and thousands of foot strikes, therefore decelerating forces that are going into the ground. You see, if you're sprinting, bam, you're just bouncing off the ground and you're not doing too many steps because it's only 100 meters or so. But over the course of 42 kilometers, you're doing thousands of steps. And each time that foot lands, you have multitudes of your weight going into the ground. And your body must absorb, pause, decelerate and re-accelerate with every single foot stride. That creates a whole mess of muscular damage. You also have underdeveloped strength that can magnify this. In the key muscle groups, this occurs a lot with runners. They trot along on training days. They get to race day. They just don't have what I label the strength endurance in the key muscle groups to take you on the journey. So this challenge for most athletes that I would work with really drove my thinking when I started to think about, let's prepare our triathletes first who wanted to include marathons, and therefore laid the gateway to ultimately our broader global approach to running. So with all of this grounding in place, there are a few things that drive the principles of readiness for the vast swath of athletes that we coach. And this is starting with some athletes that are pretty darn fast, 2 hours and 30 minutes or so, all the way up to people that are first-timers that don't really care about how long it takes. They just want to get across the darn line and enjoy it as much as they can and make sure that they can thrive and be under control, not just survive.